Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm sure Tony will be joining us shortly. Um, and we have the folks from Milliman today to give us our annual update. Jen, Happy New Year. Good to see you again.
Same. Happy New Year.
Would love to kick it over to you for an update on we've all received the materials and love to see those funded status ratios. So please go ahead.
Sure. Should I share my screen or Karen, do you have it on? Okay.
Yeah, if you would share it. Yep.
Okay. Just give me a moment. Pull them up one at a time. Let's see here. The sharing is not turned on.
Let me try that. You know what? I'm going to make you a co-host. How's that?
Okay.
You can do whatever you'd like. Okay. Can you share now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll do the police pension first. So again, this is we do full valuations in the odd year. So this represents a full update. It updates not just the investment performance, but also the updated census data as well. So here I think I'm a page behind. So key takeaways for the year. Overall, it was a good year for both plans. Assets performed well, above the expectation. And there was the liability for the police pension plan actually grew by less than we expected it to. So therefore, both of those things combined helped to improve the funded ratio from 95% to 98.2% this year. So, and how that flows out into the cost, you'll see in just a moment as I go through. So on this page, we have the membership in the plan, both as of the valuation date and historically. This is an open plan, so the active membership, that's the darker blue in the top left corner of the page, remain steady at 50 members. The retiree membership went down. There was a few deaths, a death during the year, so that the membership went down. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, this is the distribution of your active membership. Pretty well distributed between earlier service members and longer tenured employees. The average age is about 40 with average past service of about 12 years. Moving on to page 2, we look at the investments over the last 5 years, as well as details about this year. As I mentioned earlier, it was another good investment year. So, that really large gain from 5 years ago is now fully recognized. That 28% return is now being fully recognized in the actuarial value of assets. The loss from fiscal year 22 still has one more year left of being recognized, and then we've had 3 years of gains. So as you look at the bottom part of the page, you can see that the actuarial value of assets is actually lower than the market value, and that is because all the gains up here, there's more deferred gains than there are deferred losses on the investments. So those haven't been fully recognized yet. What that will do is help to put downward pressure on the contribution in future years, absent any offsetting, if they're absent any offsetting market losses that may occur. So those gains will help to keep costs down in the future. On this page, we have just the analysis that we do every year for the plan to look at the expectation of the market of the return based on your portfolio versus what we're assuming. And the top graph represents the asset allocation. You're in a 60/40 blend of equity versus fixed income. And the riskiness and expected returns. So in the bottom, we look at these returns and riskiness over a long period of time, and we tend to the 30-year portion because this is a long-term obligation that we're talking about here. So we don't want to look at short-term returns. Obviously, in the short term, there's a bigger range because there's the volatility, it can swing, but over time it does tend towards the 50th percentile. And what that means is 50% of the time we can expect the portfolio to return better than 6.1%, and 50% of the time it'll return less than 6.1%, but on average about 6.1% expected return. So because of that, you're currently at, I believe we're at 6.25 or at 6%. I forget. I'm sorry. Should know that. But no recommendations to change the interest rate assumption.
We're at 6.25. Yeah.
6.25. Yeah. So no recommendations to change anything right now. We'll stay strong at 6.25. So moving on to the liability. As I mentioned, the liability pretty much grew to what we expected. It's a little bit lower than we expected it to be, but it grew to $64.1 million this year. But the good news is the unfunded accrued liability has gone down to just $1.1 million, a drop from last year. That's partially due to the liability not growing as much as we wanted, as expected to, and mainly due to the market gains and the good performance on the investments. So the funded ratio has rebounded back up to 98.2%, approaching that 100% target there. So we've looked at the assets and the liability. So we took those together and compare those to come up with the town's actuarially determined contribution for the next fiscal year. Up top, this contribution is broken down into three components. The first being the normal costs, and that is the larger green section here. And that is the majority of your contribution. The normal cost represents the value of benefits being earned by your active members over the next year. So they're accruing another year of service and therefore earning more benefits, and that's the cost. The second component is what is called the past service costs, and that's the amortization of the unfunded accrued liability. There's not much left for unfunded accrued liability. It's just that $1.1 million. So therefore, that component is relatively small. And as the plan hits 100% funded, that will go down to zero, and even go negative to help offset your normal cost in the future. And you can see that was the case a few years back, and we're getting close to that point in time, to returning to that state again. And the last component is just a small interest component to take into account that the calculation is done as of July 1st, 2025, but the contribution will actually be made until the next year. So it's just adjust for that timing. And on the last page, we have the results from the last interim valuation, as well as two sets of results for this valuation. The middle column represents what we call the baseline. That's just updating the assets and the census data. And this is what the results would have been if no changes are made to any of the assumptions. And you see the contribution went down from last year from 1.3 million to just about 1.1 million, just over 1.1 million this year. We are making a recommendation to update the mortality assumption this year for all the plans. We did that 5 years ago when the Society of Actuaries released a public plan specific mortality table. They did say at that time, and that had a bigger impact back then, 5 years ago. If you recall, it increased liabilities quite significantly. At that time, they said they would release an update to this mortality table every 5 or 6 years. So here we are with the new update. It was the PUB 2010 table. Now it's the PUB 2016 table. It had virtually no impact on the liability. It did increased it slightly for the police plan, and therefore increased the cost slightly, but virtually no impact. And that's what we expected, because this was just a small update, not a major change. So our recommendation is to move to that change the mortality assumption this year. Any questions before I go on to the next plan? Okay. Let me find I'll do the town pension plan next. Just make this a little bit bigger and get back to the beginning here. All right, so a lot of the same story here with the town pension plan. Assets are invested similarly, so a similar investment return, a big jump in the funded ratio. The liability actually was very favorable for the town pension plan. It was 2% lower than we expected it to be this year. And mainly driven by high turnover. So a lot more terminations than we were expecting based on our assumptions, and fewer retirements. So fewer people are actually going into pay status that we expected to. And as well as lower than expected salary increases. So all those combined caused the liability to not grow by as much as we thought it would. So again, you'll see that flow through in the calculations in just a bit. Again, this is the information on the active membership remained fairly steady. While there were some retirements during the year, just not as many as we expected. This is a fairly young population when you look at the distribution. I wouldn't say young. I mean low service populations. Lots of people in the less than 10 years of service here, and so lots of time to still grow their benefits and accrue benefits at a longer duration as a result. Moving on to the assets, this is all virtually identical to the police plan, the same story. The actuarial value of assets, again, is less than the market value because of all the deferred gains up here that have yet to be recognized in the actuarial value of assets. This is identical to the police pension, so I won't go over this slide again. And onto the accrued liability again. The accrued liability grew to just under $110 million. We expected it to be larger than that. And you can see that the unfunded liability is even more negative. So you're even more overfunded. Your funded ratio jumped from 101% to 106%. And so that surplus is being used to offset the normal cost when we get to that calculation in the contribution. And you can see that here. So again, the biggest portion of your contribution is the normal cost. It's $2.6 million. But that is being partially offset by the surplus of the funded status and reducing that normal cost by $800,000. And then the small interest component. So you'll see that the funding contribution has dropped from almost $2.6 million last year down to just $2 million this year. So due to the favorable experience over the last year. And again, here's the details. And again, with no changes, the contribution still would have gone down. It would have been just about $2.1 million here in this middle column. And again, we're recommending an update to the mortality assumption, which will bring the contribution down slightly to just under $2.2 million for the town plan. Okay. Next, I'll move on to OPEB. And again, similar story for the OPEB. So lots of good news this year. I'm happy to bring good news for a change. I don't always get to do that. So investments did well. Liability is slightly lower than we expected it to be. This is the police OPEB plan, and therefore upward movement in the funded ratio. So it's, again, a similar story. This plan is closed to new members, so there's the active population is declining and it is aging. Eventually these 20 remaining active members will retire, in the next decade or so, and this plan will be just be retirees at that point. You will notice there's a drop from 32 retirees to 22 this year. That's not that many people didn't actually drop out of the plan. It's a kind of related to a phenomenon due to with our assumptions. There were about 10 or so retirees that only get dental benefits. In prior valuations, we assumed there was an implicit subsidy associated, and they only get dental benefits and they're paying 100% of the premium. And we used to value an implicit subsidy for those people. It was a small, very small liability. We no longer, based on guidance released by the Society of Actuaries and actual standards of practice, we no longer value that subsidy. So because we're not valuing a subsidy for them and they're only dental benefits, there's no liability associated with them any longer. We've taken them out of the counts. So it's not that these bodies haven't dropped off, they're just not being included in the valuation any further. So that's what that little abnormality is right there.
So I'm sorry, just to go back there, Jen. So
Sure.
22 are people currently receiving benefits at
Correct.
2025, and 20 will be receiving those benefits when they retire. Is that
correct?
Okay,
Correct.
thank you. Thanks.
Okay, on to the assets. Again, a very similar picture here. About a 9.3% compounded annual return over the last 5 years. Several years of gains in a row, which is more than offsetting the loss from fiscal 22. So again, the actual value of assets is slightly lower than the market value of assets due to those deferred gains. Again, this is identical to the pensions, so I will not go over this page again. But moving on to the liability, again, the liability did not quite grow as much as we expected it to, so that's good news. And with the favorable asset performance, the unfunded accrued liability decreased and the funded ratio increased. So at just under 80% for OPEB plan in Connecticut is very, very good. It's better than most OPEB plans in Connecticut. Half the plans in Connecticut don't even have an OPEB trust, and those that do, very few of them are even anywhere near 50%, let alone up to 80%. So this plan is in great shape. Moving on to the contribution, it's remained fairly flat for the last few years, and it's again the same this year. There's the three components, the normal cost. Again, this number will start to decline as those 20 people start to continue to retire, because that number is associated only with the active employees, and as that number gets smaller, so will the normal cost. But it's not quite dwindling yet because they're at the point of their careers where the value of their benefits is increasing at a higher rate than people dropping off. So that will eventually start to decline, but it hasn't yet. The past service cost is that amortization of the unfunded liability, and as you've been paying that down and improving the funded ratio, you've seen that number has gotten smaller over the last couple of years, incrementally smaller each year. And then the interest component. Now, there's a couple more scenarios on the OPEB side than there were on the pension side for this year. The first being, that's our baseline. That's just updating all the information. The second is updating the trend assumptions for the growth in healthcare costs in the future. We do that with every valuation. That increased the liability slightly, but it wasn't a significant change from our assumption last valuation, so it didn't have a huge impact. And then the next one is the update to the mortality table, similar to the pension. That increased the liability slightly as well. And then the last assumption is something we're recommending to help kind of smooth out the cost. Is just an update to the way we factor in an expense load. And the expense load is a load we add to the normal cost. You can see it in the middle here for expected administrative expenses to be paid out of the trust. Okay. Up until now, we've just used the prior year's expenses with a 3% growth. And we're recommending to switch that to an average of the last 2 years of expenses, only because of the nature of full valuations versus interim valuations. In the full valuation years, the fees, and most of these expenses are just actuarial fees, and the fees are higher in the full valuation years because we're doing a full valuation, and they're lower in the interim valuation years because we're just doing the interim update. So there's the expenses bounce up and down a bit. So we're recommending just to use an average of the last 2 years. So take that component. It won't be it won't fluctuate as much. It doesn't have a huge impact. It only changes the contribution by a couple $1,000s. So if there's no appetite to do that, that's okay. But just a recommendation I thought would make sense here. Okay. And then to the last plan, which is the Town OPEB. Again, a very similar story, except for on the liability side, there was lots of movement. You'll see the accrued liability is 30%, 34% lower than we expected it to be. And I'll kind of get into what really drove that. The liability on the town plan is pretty much the entire liability is is associated with the Board of Education. The town employees are not covered under the OPEB plan other than for dental, and because the dental they're covered for dental and they're paying 100%, so therefore there's no we've removed that assumption of implicit subsidy for the dental members. So there is no longer a town liability. It's entirely the Board of Ed liability at this point. Board of Ed liability can be a little bit volatile for those when we factor in the non-Medicare eligible retirees. So there are some members of the Board of Ed who are not eligible for Medicare, so they stay on the active plans. And those plans are much more expensive because, again, they're not coordinated with Medicare. And 2 people dropped off coverage this year, and so that decreased the liability quite significantly. There's also lots of turnover during the year. Lots of retirements and lots of terminations, more than we expected. They were replaced with newer hires, but the liability for those newer people is much lower than those who dropped off. So there was a large gain there. And then the last driver of the gain is that the cost share premium, the premium that retirees pay, again, retirees pay 100% of the premium, went up by more than we expected. So therefore, their offsetting of the costs is higher. Therefore, the town's liability, the net amount is lower, and that results in a reduction of liability. So for all those reasons, the liability is significantly lower, and the funded ratio just went through the roof, up to 100, just under 130% this year. So again, the population, you'll see the active membership went down significantly. So that's part of it. And part of that is not counting those. Well, the active membership that went down, and that was verified, and it is what that's where we're at. It's potentially it could be a cyclical thing that maybe there's some people this might be some open positions as of that point in time, and that might bounce back up in the future, but it did go down quite a bit. And again, on the members receiving benefits, you see that it dropped from 43 to 16. That's because we removed all the people that were only receiving dental benefits because there's no longer a liability associated with those people. Down below here, you can see the distribution of your active membership, pretty well spread out. Lots of people though hired early, similar to the pension plan. So lots of short service people at this point in time. Moving on to the assets, same message here as with the other 3 plans. Another good year of investment performance. More deferred gains than there are deferred losses. Therefore, the actual value of assets is lower than the market value, which again will help to put downward pressure on contributions in the future. I'll skip over that. And so onto your accrued liability. And you can see the accrued liability dropped significantly from $6.6 million last year down to $4.7 million. And that is due to those factors I discussed at the beginning of this set plan presentation. And the plan is now overfunded at a surplus. So this surplus is going to be used to offset the normal costs in the calculation of the actuarially determined contribution on the next page. And you can see that here. Normal cost is $250,000. So that's the value of benefits being earned by active members in the upcoming year. Again, it's lower than in the past because that active count has dropped. that could be an aberration. We'll have to see when we do the next full valuation. And you have the negative past service cost, so the amortization of that surplus to help reduce the normal cost, basically cutting it in half. And then that small interest component. So the actual determined contribution has dropped from $415,000 last year down to just over $120,000 this year. And again, moving on to the details and the scenarios, we did the same 4 scenarios as we did for the police pension plan. And again, we're recommending to update the mortality assumption and just make a slight tweak to the expense load to even that out. The disparity is much more obvious with the town OPEB than it was for the police OPEB. And, you can see $13,500 of expenses in 23, but then they jumped up to almost 28,000 in 24. So that volatility would flow through the contributions. We're recommending to use that average instead, to not make the contribution as volatile in the future. And that is all I have for prepared remarks. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Jen, I think it was pretty complete, and to your point, it's always nice to get some good news and see those numbers moving in the direction that we all like. So, and then just on the recommendations, the expenses, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's kind of aligned with how we smooth our gains and our losses, the 5-year, to try to prevent some of the, volatility. Does anyone have any comments on the recommendations that Jen had said about the new mortality table, which again, it makes sense to me as well, and then the smoothing of the expenses in the OPEB plans? No, seems to make sense to us.
Okay.
If nobody has any other questions, then I think we can thank Jen for your time and for the report. We appreciate it very much.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure. See you all
Thank
next
you,
year.
Jen. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Great. That was a nice update. It's nice to see the plan so healthy. I think I know that we've worked with Boston Partners for many, many years. It's nice to have that strong long-term relationship and have the investments. And also I know our town profile is helpful too, but nice to be in the funded space. On the next step on our agenda is really just a review of the quarterly invoices and expenditures, and to see if anyone has any questions. It's more informational, but if there are any questions, we can answer those or bring them up now. Okay, so then on our next item, the retirement and refund applications. I know both of us have quorums, so that's great. We can take action today. There were a number of them for the town. I know Tony was not able to join us, but he usually does his review. So just double checking if there were any issues that Tony had highlighted as he went through his review of these.
No, he matched all the calculations that we sent him.
Okay, wonderful. So then for the town, do I have a motion to approve? Okay, Fred approves. Do we have a second? I guess it's just Paul or me. I'll second it. And then all in favor for the town. Great. And then on the police, we have 2. One of them is from last quarter when we did not have a quorum. So were there any questions for the police? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, Brent, and then second, Paul, and all in favor for the police. Wonderful.
Favor.
Yeah, that's great. The other thing, Karen, I know you had sent around the minutes, but the calendar was also not formally approved by the police, which we can do now, that they have a quorum. This is the calendar of meetings for this year. that Karen did include on the report, or it's listed in the minutes. So do we have a motion from the police to approve the calendar of meetings for this year of 2026?
Make a motion.
Great, Paul. Okay, Brent seconds.
Yeah.
And all in favor for the police?
In favor.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so now we have the minutes. We can do the minutes for the town, which is just for the October. Did anybody have any questions on the minutes? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the October 14th minutes for the town?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Fred. I can second it. All in favor? Great. Which I don't know if Paul was here actually last quarter, so maybe we might be a little technicality of approving that one. But for the police, you have two to approve. You've got the July 15th as well as the October 14th minutes to approve. Do I have a motion to approve both of those? Mike, a second. Brent, and all in favor for the police? Great. Okay. Wonderful. Were there any other items under new business or anything else that we needed to speak about together? Okay. So with that, I will wish everyone a happy new year and make a motion to dismiss.
Thanks, Kelly. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy New Year.